Okay, folks, let's take Uniscan a little bit farther. We already know that it has many more switches than we have played with. I have Kali and I have Metasploitable. And Metasploitable still has an IP address of 192.168.75.131. It is a web server, and we're going to do some more scanning on it. And we know if you type Uniscan in Kali, with the help that comes up, that you can, well, specify the URL or a list of URLs. You can also fingerprint the web service or fingerprint the server operating system. Let's try some of these others. Now, some of these scans will be very long, so I'm going to cut them short, just so I don't waste your time, but you can see what's happening. And if you want, you can run them and then go back and check them some hours later. Let's just take a look at enabling directory checks. And what's going to happen with this one is Uniscan is going to look for the presence of directories within the website, because those are possible targets where juicy information is contained. And it's good to know that those directories exist, because we might want to try to get to them, and we want to know their names and where their path is, what their path is. So we're going to try a Uniscan TAC Q and then TAC U with HTTPS and then, or HTTP : the IP of Metasploitable. So let's say Uniscan, and then let's we're going to do the directory file checks right now, or the directory checks. So we're going to say TAC Q, and it'll go through a big long list. So just so you can see how comprehensive this is. And then TAC U, and this is HTTP : the IP of Metasploitable 192.168.75.131. Let's hit it. Press enter, and we can see that it immediately identifies that it's an Apache, and it's going after different directories here. It's finding that there's a directory called doc, dvwa, icons, index, Matildae, php info, php myadmin, test, twiki. So this is the start. This is the start of it. Okay, so we know that these directories exist. All right, so now let's go after the next one. And this one will take longer. Let's try checking for files, TAC W. So I'm going to scroll down here. I'm just going to press up arrow, and I'm going to change the TAC Q to a TAC W, \W, and I can just press enter from here. And we're going to let Uniscan search for files. Look at the numbers of tests. So it found some files right off the bat. So now what we can do is we can go a little bit deeper. We know that there are some websites. And what we can do is we can see if we can get into, say, DVWA. So let's try this /DVWA. Let's see if we can go a little bit deeper here. So I'm going to up arrow /DVWA. Let's see if it lets us in, if it lets us do it. So it's trying a bunch of different, now it's finding a whole bunch more stuff. Okay, so within DVWA, it was able to find stuff. What about, what were some of those other directories? We saw, what, Twiki, we saw Matildae, we saw test. So why don't we try Matildae? Let's try that one. So we got to make sure that we have this copied properly. So right click and copy it so that we spell it right. I'm going to up arrow, and I'm going to backspace until I erase, and I'm going to right click and paste. And so we're going to see if we can find stuff within Matildae. Okay, so we found some files within Matildae. Okay, great. And so this is how we start searching for stuff, so that we look for targets. There's a login, that's interesting. There's a PHP info page, that's interesting also. There's a configuration page, which they shouldn't be exposing. So that's interesting too. So these are all possible targets. Okay, great. So now if I Uniscan, press enter, what else can we do? We can check for robots.txt, but we already saw that robots.txt is there. Robots.txt basically tells search engines like Google to not crawl the site. Now we could try a few checks, dynamic checks and static checks. We'll try static checks first, probably take a little less time. Again, if this takes really long, I might cut it off. You can let it run if you like. We're going to try now with attack S. And so I'm going to up arrow, and I'm going to keep the attack against Matilde. You can do DVWA or one of the others if you like. Changing it to attack S, static checks. So this is basically static vulnerability tests. Press enter. And so it's trying a bunch of known vulnerability tests. And so it's going to try some remote command execution, remote file inclusion. It's trying a whole bunch of different tests here. Okay, so we can see that it's done. We can scroll back, and it ran a number of tests, and it has a report here. And it looks like we don't have much to show for it. It did save a report it's called report in 192.168.75.131.html. I think that's in USR share. Let's go take a look, see if the report says anything. So from other locations, computer, this is kind of like my computer, it's the root. Let's go to user, USR, let's open that up. Let's go to share, and then let's see if there's like Uniscan. Let's see if we can find Uniscan. Go down and find down here somewhere. Uniscan, open that up. And so see if in report, okay, there's the report. Let's open this. It should open in Firefox. And let's see if there's anything to show. And if there's nothing here, then we can try some other tests. So see if this fires up Firefox. Okay, here it is. Here is our vulnerability scan. And it did it against the Matilde folder of this website. It tried directory traversal and to get into Etsy password. And so that was it. Looks like not much to show for that. Okay, it doesn't mean that there aren't any vulnerabilities. It just means this particular tool was unsuccessful in finding them. Okay, so how about another one? Let's see if we can do the dynamic test. Now this is going to do things like blind SQL injection, which might take a long time, so this one we might cut off, but let's just try it. We're going to scroll back. What was the dynamic test? Oh, okay, D. All right. So we're going to scroll down. We're going to up arrow. We're going to left arrow. We're going to change that -S to a -D. Press end. I think what we're going to do is we're not going to specify a particular web page in the server. Let's just start with the server. Press enter. And so it's trying a variety of things. So it's going to try to see if it can do code disclosure, web backdoor disclosure, PHP info disclosure, upload from detect. The FCK editor is actually a dynamic, or it's a rich text editor that allows you to edit web pages and applications, see if there's any emails, external hosts, and something called TimThumb. So these are a bunch of tests that it's running right now. You can see that it's running the tests. We'll come back in just a moment as soon as it is done. Well, we can see that the tests are still running here. It's gone through a number of the test modules, and we're on to another one here. So if we scroll back, see if we can scroll back at all. This one's running tests very quickly. So it was loading a number of these. Let's just try to get to this where we can see the tests that were loaded. Okay, so we've seen the editor upload test, the backdoor. Let's see, I think it's, what is it doing now? PHP info. Still has a ways to go here. What we're going to do is we're just going to stop for now, and if it finishes in a reasonable amount of time, we'll come back and we'll examine the results. I would encourage you to also run this, but you'll want to run it where you can let it run for several hours, and then just kind of see. The main point of this is just how comprehensive this vulnerability scan is. Okay, we're up to blind SQL injection, and we talk about SQL injection in another activity. So you can see just how comprehensive this is. And when you look at the results, and we were able to look at one result report, although it didn't have much to say, those things that it does report, do Google searches on those. And just copy and paste when it specifies a vulnerability, even if you're not really familiar with what that means, do Google search to see if there are any exploits for that vulnerability. So we are going to stop for now, and if it ends in a reasonable amount of time, we're going to come back and take a look at the results. And I encourage you to try this at least once, just so that you can see for yourself the level of how comprehensive this is. The scan is done, and as we scroll back, we can see a lot of blind SQL attempts. It's a very laborious process, actually. Efforts to get into Etsy password, and efforts to get into, well, more efforts, various efforts to get into Etsy password. What you do when you have a scan like this, you look at where it says VUL for vulnerability, and then just copy and paste some of this stuff into a Google search. And you're especially interested in the word Matildae because the IP address is not so important. But especially Matildae, and from Matildae on, look for, do Google searches for this to see if it recommends any exploits that you can do. So we can see that we have discovered loads of vulnerabilities. Just about every attempt here turned up a vulnerability. And so a variety of different tests here. Now, I do have to tell you, this is a simple and free tool. So a good tool would recommend some things right away, or make it a lot easier, or it would show like the CVE number to make it a lot easier to research. This is a much simpler tool, but we can see how comprehensive it is. So all these different attempts to get into Etsy password in Matildae, going farther back, different kinds of things, vulnerabilities for blind SQL. And so you can see it was trying a variety of different words here to see if they exist and see if they can be exploited. All of them turned up vulnerabilities here. So what you probably want to do is look up, like, say, Matildae Twiki or Matildae main, or whether these are actually part of Twiki. See if there are more. Just Matildae in general. And we see some attempts here. Topic name is also possible. Very long, tricky topic name. So I don't see where it says vulnerability per se, but there were attempts here. What you'll want to do is just look at this and go, okay, Matildae reported huge numbers of vulnerabilities with all these different attempts here. It's trying to go after backup files, see if they can be broken into. This is just about Twiki. But we know that Matildae has, or rather, Metasploitable has a number of websites that you can go after. We saw the DVWA, Matildae, Twiki. These were just some of them as we scroll more. And we can see here that the FCK editor found a number of emails. So that these are all potential targets for like a phishing campaign. And then it found a reference to an external host, and a bunch more references to external hosts here. And so, very comprehensive. So it is worth then, because so many things were found, upload forms were found, so many upload forms were found, it's worth doing a Google search on Matildae to see about exploits you can do, because so many things were found that could potentially be targets. And so this is what it looks like when you do a much more comprehensive vulnerability scan on a web server.